Okay, I quickly just want to do a little bit more analysis on some existing logos. And this is always helpful. It's good to do yourselves if you see a logo that you like and you're wondering, why do I like this logo so much? There's a few things to look for in that. With logo design, it really comes down to the details. The detailed aspects of a logo that really make it work as we'll say a visual compilation of elements. You know, putting a logo together with both type, shape, and color can be quite difficult actually, because a lot of the linear aspects of the logo have to work together. And at the same time, you're working with typefaces that hopefully are complementary to the logo, reflect what the logo may be about, and so on. So little details. And when I show you these, it's things that I'd like you to look for, like opportunities to look for in the design of your own logo. So for example, this one, the little details. And again, when I say opportunity, look for where you can work these kinds of things with your logo, and it will help you with placement and so on. So this logo is what we would call a centered or symmetric logo. It's a combination logo, meaning it's both an icon, the top shape here, and a word mark. So it's an icon and word mark combination. And a couple details to notice. So fortunately with this word Skymark, the M landed in the center, and the shape that was created is interacting with that M. The way it's interacting with it, it's visually interacting with it, is it's mimicking the angles here. So you can see the angle of the shape and the angle of the M are the same. And the space that it is, the space that it's away from that M is space that was found elsewhere in the word mark. So pretty much here, this was the guide. That space was a guide for this. So you're often looking, if you don't know how far to make your icon from your word mark, look for spatial cues in there. If I match this, I'm just going to use a shape to grab that, and then I'll put it here. You can see it's not totally straight, but you can see that matches. What you're doing is you're using spatial cues to help with placement and proximity when you're bringing elements together. That's really important because you're creating consistency and comfort for the viewing eye. Okay, and then the other thing is the width. The width of this shape here matches the width of our M. So that again creates that linear consistency that the eye looks for as far as comfort. If I made that a little smaller, it weakens the icon, but now we've got this odd spacing that happens. Even if it's still closer, something feels a little bit off. So matching that is very helpful in order to keep the eye centered and to maintain that alignment that our eye naturally looks for. The other thing is the size relation. This is something to watch for in logos. The size relation between the icon and the word mark. If I made the icon quite large and the word mark was like that, and you do see this in logos, but some things we have to consider when that's happening is when this logo is quite small, like on a business card or something, the type can become difficult to read. So we're always trying to find that correct balance between the icon size, the word mark size, and even secondary word marks. You want to make sure that when you have type in a logo, you find that correct balance between all elements. That can be difficult to do. It's not something that comes immediately. It takes time, it takes practice. And more than anything, I would say it takes being observant to good logos and why they work. So if you ever do see logos that you like that have an icon and a word mark with a combination logo, really study these spatial relationship between them. Look for aspects of placement, so why the word mark is placed in a certain way with the icon. Is there alignment going on? Is there spatial and optical interaction between the word mark and the icon? Really observing those things can make a logo come together quite well. It really is seriously in the details when it comes to logo design. Let's look at this one. So this logo, it has a mix of typefaces. So we really have three typefaces going here. We've got this cursive kind of a signage brush sort of typeface. We have what's called a slab serif type, and then we've got a sans serif typeface. So we've got a logo with three typefaces. That's usually too many, but it works in this style of logo. So now I want to point out a few things. When you're bringing all these elements together, again, of course, you're considering spatial cues and alignment. So if you look here where the D lands, the D being kind of a circular, it's interacting with this part of the logo, the centered part. So this is representing a bearing, because that's what this machinist works with. So that's bringing our eye to center through a letter that is actually dominant in this word. And then the being, a smaller aspect of the title, it's reduced a bit to maintain the dominance here. We have symmetry, of course. And then if you look even here, the A, the thickness of this stroke on the A is mimicked in the frame around the word. So again, you're maintaining that optical transition between typography and shape that's in the logo. Spacing, again, a lot of consistent spacing here, much based in what we're seeing in the typography and even down here in the line spacing. So wherever you can make equal spacing, the spacing around the frame here and so on, wherever you can maintain that, that's going to help in the details of your logo. It's going to create a comfortable optical environment. So yeah, the equal spacing or equal width here carrying into the frame. Another thing, I'm going to try and draw this so you can see it. You'll see here, if I make a rectangle here, and these are details that otherwise you're never going to have someone say that they notice that. This particular client, if I remember correctly, they actually did notice it because they're quite detail oriented themselves. But you'll see the shape. I'm just going to try and quickly get this to mimic it. So we have that circle there. And what that does, what you're doing when you bring elements together is you can see that you have shape in the negative space. So the way that came together, because this bearing aspect of the logo is so important in terms of what the company does, it's centered, it's kind of, the logo revolves around it, we'll say. The design itself revolves around that element of the logo. So it really had to be integrated because it's a little complicated looking. It wouldn't be clear to everyone what it is immediately. People that are interested in what this company does would know, but that doesn't matter. You still want some engagement with people who really don't even care, right? So this shape is found in here. So the way that was done was using shape to bring together how that should sit. So based on a circle and a rectangle, this was kind of formed to follow that line. And that really helps, again, with comfort with the viewer's eye. If something was slightly off here, I'll try and kind of make it look a bit off. You know, how about I do this? Let's say this was a little bit up, just a little bit. So we lose that very clean line, right? So it's a little trip that otherwise people may not notice, you know, just a little thing, but it minimizes comfort and actually creates tension for the viewer. But when their eye can just travel a line, pick up a line and travel it cleanly through the logo, that becomes very effective. So again, it's another thing to observe in logos, how the eye travels certain lines in that logo. And let's look at a few more very quickly. So if you're ever going for optical illusions, you know, have fun with it. But don't try too hard. Optical illusions often happen by accident. This logo, the client wanted an icon, but they wanted to work the N and the Z in the icon. Well, it was a little difficult to achieve, but with some time and playing around, because when you're mixing type, you want to maintain you want it to feel like it's the same typeface. So with this one, we were actually able to get the N and the V, so right in here, and then the Z, of course. So in all one icon, we managed to achieve the three shapes. Now, does this one work when it's flat color, like just black? It should. And then we look at the negatives. Does it work when we only have black? So I'm going to color these white and see how that works. For the most part, it doesn't, right? We lose that effect. So you have to be careful, because sometimes a logo actually depends on the gradation, on the shadows and the varied colors and so on. So this one, for the most part, works even if we remove the gradient and just go to a light gray. But it's pretty much highly dependent on the gradient, which isn't ideal. But also, when you're in business and the client says we love it, you say okay, and you send the bill. So we don't always get our way when it comes to designing the way we would prefer to, but at the same time, we're in business, so we have to try our best. And then again, look at the size relationship between the icon and the word mark. Often you'll see logos will make the word mark the same width as the icon, but if I do that here, what that does is it almost narrows, it brings the eye into here, and it loses the impact of the word mark. The word mark's a very important part of the logo. So when you go slightly beyond, but again, you remember there's angles that are happening in here. The eye is traveling in certain ways. You want to make sure that you're playing off of size. So typically this icon, if I remember correctly, I'm going to check, is playing off the height, the cap height of these letters. So again, you can see we're using the cap height of the letters to help us determine the size relationship between the icon and the word mark. So you're always looking for those opportunities to find those spatial relationships. It doesn't always have to be instinctive or a guess. The answers are often in elements that you're working with. So what was done here is the width of the word mark was determined to give it some dominance, but not overtake the icon or vice versa. And then at the same time, it was probably a little longer, maybe a little shorter, and then it was determined that, okay, well, how about we go by this width? And then you have, again, a spatial relationship that the eye and the brain see, but you don't necessarily see consciously. And then this one, so use the initials, sorry for the low res image there. Use the initials, so the E and the W. Now this company built cottages and houses and so on. So using the E and W, but again using some gradient to make it look like the side of a house, the roof coming down and the shadow creating the overhang. So it's a little dependent on gradient. It worked okay when it was a solid as well. But then you want to look at, you're seeing the, your eye is seeing part of a larger shape, right? Like we're putting together in our mind the front of the house and so on. So then when you place that icon, you have to decide, well, how are we going to place this logically with the word mark? Well, again, the center of this word happened to be the W that points up. So it's playing off of the point of that W, and it just happened to land in a way that the weight is appropriate, because our eye, remember, our eye is filling in something that doesn't even really exist. Our eye is completing the story, saying, oh, I see the house now. So you choose an aspect of the word mark to play your alignment off of. When you have two O's together like this, often that's used. So if we look down here, this one being a sound company about joy or whatever, this is a really old logo too, but noticing, okay, the O's we relate to eyes, we relate to symmetry and so on. So we could kind of make a face with this, the eyes, the nose, and the mouth. So the smile, the sound, and again, working with the space. So you have to play around to decide, well, how close does that come? And typically you're going to find that answer in other aspects of the space. So if I make a little circle here, that space will likely be pretty much, the same as that, right? So your spatial cues are always existing in other parts of your logo. This is probably not based on that space. So again, this part had to be decided, okay, well, where does that sit? Well, it has to sit comfortably between the large word mark and the sound waves here. So it seemed to just sit best there. It wasn't aligned with this because that would seem almost too contrived, and it would separate the AUDI from the O. So because this would create a linear if the D was aligned with the I. So again, you're always making those little decisions with logos, and I really encourage you to look at logos from that kind of analysis. They're not always going to be good logos. I would say there's probably more bad logos than there are really good. But when you look at the relationships that are happening in a logo, that can teach you so much about designing a logo.